Tonight on LTC News, mandated flu shots.
The idea is that if we are able to reduce the impact of flu this year, we'll be able to preserve our resources to be able to manage some of the serious issues that come up with COVID.
The LLAMA food pantry closes.
Part of the struggle with the pantry, and one of the reasons we decided to shut it down, is that we rely on a lot of volunteers, including a lot of teachers, and they had the summer free, and but it just became harder and harder to recruit and retain volunteers because people were going back to work.
And quilts come to Lowell galleries.
So COVID shut us down for a long time. We closed in mid-March and we just opened again in mid-July. We're seeing very low visitorship, which affects our bottom line. But the people who come are pleased with the exhibit.
All this and much more on this edition of LTC News. Welcome to LTC News. I'm your host, Matt Nelson. The closely watched state rep race for the 17th Middlesex District came to a close on September 1st when newcomer Vanna Howard defeated longtime incumbent Dave Nangle for the Democratic nomination. LTC spoke with Howard about the race and her priorities if she wins the seat in November.
So what got you interested in politics?
I think it had to do with with coronavirus, with the pandemic. When that hit in March and we went into quarantine, the community actually reached out to me asking me to run. I never really had a thought of running, but to run your first campaign in a pandemic, and so and that was and also, it was an uphill challenge.
Would you say that that's going to be the focus should you win in November? Is it going to be health, because you do of course come from the community health center as well, one of the many organizations that you help out?
Definitely, that would be one of my priorities. We need equity in everything. Public health, economic recovery, education, childcare, housing, you name it. And so those would be my priorities if I should be successful in November.
What would you tell those who are disillusioned for whatever reason, maybe they're too old, maybe they're too young, maybe something happened politically that they didn't agree with or something like that? I don't know. But what would you tell the disillusioned people out there?
I'm so blessed to have 100+ volunteers, and half of my volunteers and supporters, first time. It was their first time participating in a campaign. I have all ages. I have from 2 years old up to teen, to folks in their 50s, 60s, and 80s. They were energized, they were excited. And so for folks that have never participated or feeling, oh gosh, this country is going backwards or anything like that, it's critical to pay attention to what's going on in your city, in your state, in your country, across the world. And so it's critical. On these critical issues, we need to come together and work together collectively and address these issues together. And so it's important to do your civic duty and civic engagement. That's another thing too. I have youth are so excited to do civic engagement, and first time they're excited. They can't wait to go back out there again tomorrow. And it's important to vote, to exercise your civic engagement and your civic duty.
Lifting Lowellians, Assistance in Mutual Aid, or LLAMA, is a group of volunteers working to keep people connected and thriving during the pandemic. Since its start in March, LLAMA has matched people who have time and resources with others in the community that need assistance. On August 27th, LLAMA decided to close one of its first efforts, the Community Food Pantry. Nancy Cohn, Executive Director of the Lowell Alliance and one of the core founders of LLAMA, explains the organization's plans.
So LLAMA is a mutual aid organization that came together, just a lot of concerned citizens, some nonprofit people like myself, in response to the pandemic back in March, because we could see that there were huge needs in the community. And nobody really knew what to do under these circumstances. So it was just a group of, I would say, kind of like a core group of about 25 people, but also over 100 different volunteers came out to say, we want to do what we can help. People were getting laid off. It took a long time for unemployment to kick in for a lot of people. As we know, the demand was huge, so all the agencies were kind of overstretched and couldn't respond to the huge outpouring of needs. So yeah, I would say food, which is how the pantry came about actually.
We've been doing this since April 1st, the first week in April. We started serving 25 families a week, and now we're serving about 60 families a week, or about 5,000 individuals since we first started about 5 months ago.
We realized that there were a lot of people who were housebound, and the number of requests was sort of outstripping the number of people who were willing to go out and do shopping and bring them food. So we just said, let's start a pantry, a mobile food pantry, so that we can deliver food, because that was a need, that was a gap that wasn't being filled.
So what we did is we have volunteers that shop. Then we come back, we label the boxes for each family, then we pack the bags with whatever the families requested. That can be, it's not just food, we also give families other supplies like cleaning supplies, hygiene. It's also very important, toothpaste, things like that. So each volunteer takes a list of families, they pack the boxes for that family on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we take all the cold stuff out of our fridges and we make cold bags for the families, and then they get divided by neighborhoods on tables, and volunteer drivers come, we load up their cars, and they bring them to the families.
Part of the struggle with the pantry, and one of the reasons we decided to shut it down, is that we rely on a lot of volunteers, including a lot of teachers, and they had the summer free, and but it just became harder and harder to recruit and retain volunteers because people were going back to work. And so on and so forth. And I think also there wasn't such a sense of urgency as there was in the early days of the pandemic shutdown. LLAMA is going to continue to respond to food requests by, again, matching volunteers to do food runs or providing gift cards. They are also working on sort of like developing neighborhood pods. In other words, going out into each neighborhood and kind of getting a group of neighbors who are willing to respond to their neighbors' needs. And it's meant to be mutual, sort of reciprocal. That's the idea. So working on kind of building out these neighborhood pods. Continuing to meet needs. We're discussing using some of the funds we've raised for rental assistance. I don't know if that's, there's such a need again, and there are a number of organizations that are doing some of that, but the need again is far greater than the resources that are available. Increasingly, what we're hearing from people that we've been, helping to feed is concern over paying their rent. A lot of people that we have been sort of providing food for regularly are very concerned about losing their housing. And of course, eviction moratorium is lifted in October. Maybe that'll be extended, maybe not, but there could be a huge wave of evictions. And actually, that is something else that LLAMA is starting to focus on. We have a sort of an advocacy team, and we're looking at helping to prevent evictions, and then sort of focusing on like affordable housing policy changes in the city to create or encourage more affordable housing, because even before the pandemic, that was a problem, and now it's kind of come to a crisis point. So that's something we're going to be focusing on in the long term.
Now that fall is here, we have another virus to worry about, the flu. Like COVID-19, the yearly flu is very contagious and can have similar symptoms. While not as deadly as COVID, thousands of Americans become seriously ill with influenza every year. So in order to mitigate the impact on healthcare resources, Governor Baker announced a new vaccination mandate. Students at Massachusetts schools from kindergarten up to university, as well as children over 6 months old in daycare, must get the flu vaccine by the end of the year. Dr. Kumbal Rajesh at the Lowell Community Health Center gives us a medical perspective on the benefits and the safety of the vaccine.
We've had a lot of people show up, started first thing this morning, and we've had probably over a couple of hundred people show up today for their flu vaccine. Certainly this year there's a lot of information about how important it is now with COVID. And so we're really encouraging people to come and get their flu vaccine and protect themselves.
The mandate is a good thing for the state, and I do feel like it'll be very beneficial this year. And hoping that we can really use our resources better. The idea is that if we are able to reduce the impact of flu this year, we'll be able to preserve our resources to be able to manage some of the serious issues that come up with COVID. So in order to do that, we really have to be ensuring that we are doing everything we can to control the flu as best as we can. The vaccine components and the vaccine itself as a track record of being used in multiple scenarios. The amounts of additives that are in the vaccines are so minuscule that they are really not known to produce any impact on the health of that patient at all. I mean, compare that to the amount of chemicals we expose ourselves daily to a variety of those things, in the environment. So that is far more dangerous, in my opinion, than the arsenic or any other components of the vaccine itself. The reactions to flu vaccine are so few and so rare that it really is not to be put in a category of considering danger. We are setting up an outdoor area where people can get vaccines. This is currently limited to Lowell Community Health Center patients only, and it's about 2 to 3 times a week for pretty much the whole day that we are reaching out by social media, by texting, and by other means to get all of our patients to come in the months of September, going into October. They don't need any appointments. They can just show up, they get their vaccines. The vaccine is entered into our record, so we have a copy of that. The patient is given a proof of vaccination as well to take home with them. Many a time the flu vaccine is associated with, oh, I get the flu because I got the flu vaccine. I really want to dispel that myth as well, because the flu vaccine is the killed virus. You cannot get the flu from the flu vaccine. It might take a while for the flu vaccine to actually build up the immunity. In the meantime, coincidentally, you might get the actual flu. That doesn't mean the vaccine gave the flu to you. Getting it is still better than not getting it, even though we can't really predict the efficacy of the flu vaccine in and of itself.
The flu vaccine clinic at the health center is open on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 9 a.m. to noon and from 1:30 to 4 p.m. If you are not a patient of the health center, you can get the flu vaccine wherever you get your health care. In this next segment, we take a special look at the annual tradition of quilt art at a couple of local galleries.
The interesting thing about art quilts is that the artist has to do all the work like you would for a collage, but then another art form is stitching it all together. My name is Jim DYMENT. I'm the executive director here at the Brush Art Gallery and Studios. Here and there is an exhibit about favorite places, and we did a call for entries. And this was challenging this year to have an exhibit during the COVID crisis. We usually get a lot of visitors this time of year, and of course we've noticed a drop in visitors because of the situation. So what we've decided to do is have all of our exhibits online. This exhibit is a yearly tradition, and it's good to tie in with the New England Quilt Museum.
So this year, 2020, marks the 100th anniversary of women fighting for and winning the vote, which is called suffrage. And it was a 150-year long battle. Started out for women wanting full rights, not just the vote, but the right to own property, the right to equal pay, which goes back forever. My name is Pam Weeks. I'm the Binney Family Curator at the New England Quilt Museum. So quilting is an art and a craft that's really misunderstood in the general public. Quilts have been used for a very long time to express emotion, to express political views, to express views on social issues. And so for suffrage to be represented in art quilts, it makes a lot of sense. And these are amazing quilts. They're made by professional artists who choose fabric as their medium. There's photo transfer, there's painting on fabric. And what makes a quilt is that it's made of fabric or fabric-like material and has 3 layers, and those layers are held together with stitching. So COVID shut us down for a long time. We closed in mid-March and we just opened again in mid-July. We're seeing very low visitorship, which affects our bottom line. But the people who come are pleased with the exhibit. They just, so the significant thing about this exhibit of quilts and suffrage is it's also a great way to learn about history. And the 29 quilts represent 29 different people in most cases, very few who are known. It's also kind of a fun and comforting way to learn about history. And I think in this time of COVID, we all need a little comfort.
In this week's Sunspot, Lowell Sun Enterprise Editor Chris Scott sits down with Middlesex Community College Board Chair James Campbell.
Thank you for tuning into this latest edition of Sunspot. I am Chris Scott, by the way, the Enterprise Editor at the Sun, and with me is Jim Campbell. Jim is the Chairman of the Middlesex Community College Board of Trustees. I think it's Jim's second appearance. You know, are most kids at home, or is there or a hybrid, or and then how is the college dealing with the labs? You really didn't touch on the labs. So are the labs being done in person, Jim?
Yes, the labs are done in person. As I'm sure you're aware, we have a lot of medical education. The dental area, we have an excellent nursing program, which do require lab classes. We're staggering those classes so that there's social distancing involved, and that is getting done. But the majority of students at Middlesex are at home, learning at home.
Okay, and you know, I know it's kind of early. They just started this week, so it's probably early to formulate any kind of a reaction to what the students are seeing and how they're doing with it. But have you heard any anecdotes from just the first or second day? I mean, did everything seem to go pretty well? Students happy, staff is happy, administrators happy?
Well, I think that there's certainly frustration. I know, I mean, I have family members. My daughter's a school teacher, and they're experiencing some difficulty and some frustration, but they have children at home and they're trying to educate. They have to, in her case, she has to be at school every day. I would say that that it went very well yesterday, considering the circumstances. I'm not saying that it was perfect. We had a lot of students that needed their questions answered. There were a lot of health questions, and we were prepared to deal with that. We had staff here. We anticipated it, and I believe that it was, considering it was as smooth as possible.
There have been several reports today about the loss of jobs, you know, across numerous sectors throughout the entire country. And I'm just wondering how that has trickled down to the community colleges, you know, which typically have been known to allow people to retrain themselves and pick up a certificate, say in some type of medical technology field of study, which you mentioned earlier. Toward that end, has Middlesex seen an increase in enrollment for this fall, with people trying to retrain themselves and rebrand themselves, or is enrollment level, or is it dropping?
Well, let me address the job question first. Yes, it has impacted all community colleges. Middlesex Community College this year, for example, the board took a position that we would be cutting the budget, and we did cut the budget 5%. Required a lot of sacrifices. There have been layoffs. We, like every other community college, or every other college, particularly community colleges in the country, we've seen a steady decline in enrollment. And that has continued over the past, I'm going to say, probably 7 or 8 years. And a lot of that has to do with demographics, that there were just not the children in that age group. For example, as I mentioned, my daughter's a second grade teacher, and they're overflowing in the first and second grade. However, in the high school, we've seen a decrease. It'll catch up at some particular point, but that has happened. Middlesex, there are 15 community colleges in Massachusetts, and Middlesex has continued over the period of time. I can speak for the last 5 years that we have been in the top, at least the top three, usually number one in the least amount of enrollment, decline in enrollment. So we expect that this year. We're figures are all in. We deal with a number of high schools in the area, and we have what's called the Early College Dual Enrollment Program, and we're number one in the state in enrollment for that program. Those numbers are not in yet. We deal with all the high schools in the district, so that will give us a better idea. But I would say that we'll be either the least of all the 15, or at least in the top three.
Okay, just to try to put that a little bit more in context, and I hear you fully about the numbers aren't all in yet, but say 5 years ago, the incoming freshman class at Middlesex had how many students, and do you have any idea how many there were coming in this September?
I can just roughly guess that we use a figure of around 10 to 11,000. That was I've been here 5 years, and we've seen a decrease over the years. And I would say, I can't say the exact number because I don't have that right now, but there's been a steady decrease. I'm trying to think of last year's number. I believe it was around 3% or 4%, which was consistent with the national figures for community colleges.
We've had Marty Meehan on, the president of UMass, a couple of times, and I hope to have him on within the next couple of weeks. He has predicted that there'll be some consolidation in the community college sphere, but also in the state university. The Fitchburg states, not to single them out, but the Fitchburg states, the Worcester State. What are you hearing from, other board chairmen? Do you think 3 or 4 years from now that Massachusetts will still have 15 community colleges with 15 individual presidents, with 15 individual boards, or do you think there'll be some consolidation?
I believe there'll be some consolidation, and you mentioned talking with other board chairs and with other presidents. We do meet periodically and discuss sharing services and those types of things. But I want to refer back to a statement that Governor Baker made a couple of years back when he had all the college. There were 29 campuses in Massachusetts, 15 of them are community colleges. And Governor Baker called in all the chairs and the presidents for a meeting, and he said quite frankly that there would not be 29 campuses in the very near future. So I do expect there'll be some consolidation, and that's why I think it's important that Middlesex maintain its position financially. In other words, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging too much, but I think I probably am.
Well, you're the board chairman. You can brag.
Middlesex is considered Middlesex is considered the flagship of the community colleges in Massachusetts, and I have a very strong feeling, Chris. As you know, I was city manager in Lowell when
Right.
Middlesex first came here, and I was part of a team. Paul Sheehy, Paul Songus. I was city manager. Governor Dukakis was governor, and we were able to bring the college here. It was supposed to be a satellite college, but and that was the plan. But as you can see over the years, the impact that Middlesex has had on the city of Lowell, we've grown to. We have 7 buildings in the city of Lowell. In the greater Lowell area, we employ approximately 500 people. We provide a great impact to the economy of this area. So we're very protective of our presence here.
This is going to be a big year for Middlesex. It's President Mabry's last year, and the board will soon decide how it's going to select his replacement. So can you bring us up to speed on that? And when can we see some real news from the board about how it's going to select his replacement and what the timetable is?
Right. Just quickly, it's also our 50th anniversary, which
that's correct. I've spoken to Patrick about that.
We're moving forward. I've had a couple of conversations with Commissioner Santiago, the Commissioner of Higher Education, and he had recommended that we really start to push this in the fall. Our first step is hiring for the board to look at hiring an outside search firm. It's highly recommended by the Board of Education and the Commissioner. We started that process because it's an RFP bid process. Mm-hmm. So we've had that going during the summer months. We're meeting, I think it's next week, to review the finalists. And on the 24th of September, we have a full board meeting where we will bring that before the board, and the decision will be made whether or not we will hire an outside firm. And that due diligence is being done as we speak. They're being interviewed. We'll further interview them next week at a subcommittee meeting, and then we'll have there'll be a decision made. That's the first real step.
Excuse me, Jim. Excuse me, a quick question. I mean, it's safe to say that that Middlesex will hire an outside firm. I've really never seen an institution of higher learning not hire an outside firm. Right.
People have to remember that the board makes a decision, but this is a joint effort between the Board of Higher Ed, the Commissioner of Higher Ed, and the board as we go through this process. As a matter of fact, the Commissioner will serve on the search committee, on our search committee,
right,
and be involved in the process, which he has been. I notified him in, I believe it was May, when President Mabry, and we've communicated. He has a set of guidelines that he's provided me that we're required to follow. We're following that step by step. The reason they suggested the fall is because he thought the national pool would be better in the fall rather than the summer months. So
gotcha.
We're right on track.
What's the timetable in terms of actually hiring someone? Do you hope to have someone on by the end of the year? Or
well, there are 5 searches. There are 5 searches going on in Massachusetts. Most of the other searches are going to be vacant, are already vacant, or they're going to be vacant in January. So our goal is to sometime after the first of the year, certainly before the school year is over. I would like to see the last couple of months to have the person that's selected come in and work with the staff and the president, the outgoing president. So that's my goal to
after the first of the year. I'm sorry, Jim.
After the first of the year.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this latest edition of Sunspot. We'll be back in a couple more weeks with another guest. Have a good night, everyone, and stay healthy. Thank you.
And that does it for this edition of LTC News. You can find us on LTC channels 8, 95, and 99, online at ltc.org, on Roku in the LTC News playlist, on Facebook at LTC Lowell, or on our YouTube page. We leave you now with another look at the quilt exhibition. I'm your host, Matt Nelson. Thanks for joining us.